Hello again. I'm sure that since the Black Lives Matter protest last summer, everybody has heard the expression white privilege many times. The problem is that nobody seems to have any clear idea of what it actually is meant to indicate. What is white privilege? I recollect when I first heard this expression back at the end of the 1980s, a white feminist called Peggy McIntosh published a piece in an American magazine called White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And she listed a couple of dozen ways that her life as a white person was different from the lives of black people and other visible minorities. I attach a link to the original article in the description to this video. The thing is, Peggy McIntosh's list is still used as something of a gold standard when people discuss white privilege. That list is always mentioned and always talked of with reverence as though it's somehow relevant to the modern world. I thought it might be interesting to have a quick look at that list and see whether it really does bear any relation to the situation today. The reason that I'm using her list initially to look at this subject is it's the only one that contains clear and definable aspects of what is meant by white privilege, things that we can actually look at and ask ourselves, is this true or not? Let's have a look. The first point she makes is this. She says, I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. Well, this is absolutely the case with black and Asian people in Britain today. In fact, a lot of Asian people do spend most of their time with other people of the same race. The same thing happens with black people. Effectively, this particular point about white privilege simply doesn't apply. It's inapplicable. The second point is this. If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure renting or purchasing housing in an area in which I can afford and in which I would want to live. Well, yes, that applies to black people in Britain today and Asian people. There's absolutely no limitations on where people want to live, whether they want to rent somewhere or buy a place. So the second aspect of white privilege is also completely irrelevant. Her third point, I can be pretty sure that my neighbours in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. Well, this is the case, I think. Most people will be welcoming, or at the very least neutral to new neighbours until they see how they are. I don't know many people that would be anything other than neutral to new neighbours, at least today in Britain. So again, it's nothing to do with the case. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. Yep, that applies to all ethnicities in Britain as well. I can turn on the television or open to the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. To be brutally frank, this is more of a problem for white people these days than it is those who are black. But anyway, that's not an example of white privilege either. When I'm told about our national heritage or about civilization, I'm shown that people of my colour made it what it is. Well, people of colour didn't make our national heritage what it is, so we can forget that one. I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the existence of their race. Yep, that applies to black, white and Asian people in Britain today. If I want to, I can be pretty sure of finding a publisher for this piece on white privilege. Well, this one is a bit bonkers. When I submit an article to a magazine or a pitch to a publisher, they don't know what colour I am. If Peggy McIntosh really was pretty sure of finding a publisher for her article, then she's very lucky. It has nothing to do with race, though. It's more likely that she was well known for writing on that subject. 7. I can go into a music shop and count on finding the music of my race represented, into a supermarket and find the staple foods that fit with my cultural traditions, into a hairdresser's shop and find someone who can cut my hair. Well, yes, that applies to all ethnicities in Britain. There's nothing, I won't go through the rest of it, it's all the same. There's nothing at all in that checklist on white privilege which is the slightest bit applicable to Britain today. It's nonsense. I don't think I need to go any further with it. Why then do we keep hearing about white privilege so often? Is there a new set of criteria or some checklist for the modern world which will enable us to look at this privilege we supposedly have in detail and work out how sensible what is being said about it is? Actually, no. That checklist was devised over 30 years ago. It's still the standard way of demonstrating that white privilege exists. I attach a link from an article from Harper's Bazaar last month. Lo and behold, the same examples, Peggy McIntosh, that supposedly prove that white privilege exists. It hasn't been updated. What this means is that when people in Britain accuse white people of having white privilege, they are referring to those things which I explained above. In modern Britain, the concept of white privilege is utterly absurd, at least if measured by Peggy McIntosh's checklist. The children's charity Bernardo's made an attempt last year to explain white privilege, but I don't find their ideas very convincing. I give a link to their document above. For instance, they say that a white person, you feel safer at home and in your local area, unlike 37.4% of black people and 44.8% of Asian people. And when you're on public transport, you probably won't experience a hate crime because of your skin colour, but you might witness one against a person of colour because hate crimes on railway networks increased 37% in England between 2011 and 2015. You help your children get ready for school where they're likely to be taught by white teachers and see plenty of examples of people like them achieving great things in history and literature. Over the years, they're more likely to avoid being excluded, achieve better results at GCSE and A-levels, and go to a Russell Group university than their black and Asian peers. Right, this is simply not true. Let's look at it in detail and see what it means. You feel safer at home and in your local area, unlike 37.4% of black people and 44.8% of Asian people. Does this mean that 44.8% of Asian people feel unsafe at home? There's no source for this contention, which sounds to me a little improbable. What about you probably won't experience a hate crime because of your skin colour, but you might witness one against a person of colour? Well, what about being mugged? This is a crime with distinct racial overtones when you look at the typical offender-victim profile. Is that included in the category of hate crimes? How likely is it we will see a hate crime on the way to work? We're not given any figures for the prevalence of such crimes, nor crucially what constitutes a hate crime. You help your children get ready for school where they're likely to be taught by white teachers. Since 85% of the population of Britain is white, then yes, your children is likely to be taught by a white teacher. It's a simple matter of statistics. Is this a problem? If so, then perhaps consider moving to a country where the percentage of white people is lower than 85%. I can't think what else I can say about that. Oh, here's something which is completely untrue. Over the years, they're more likely to avoid being excluded, achieve better results at GCSE and A-level, and go to a Russell Group university than their black or Asian peers. Well, white children are more likely to avoid being excluded than black children, that's true, but they're not more likely to avoid being excluded than Indians or Chinese, who of course have the lowest rates of exclusion. Similarly, white children may get better results at GCSEs and A-levels than black children, but their results won't be as good as those of Asians. This is a deliberate blurring caused by bundling together all ethnic minorities in one group. At the bottom of the page in the Bernardo's document, they're giving a link to Peggy McIntosh's 1989 piece of white privilege. showing that it's still the gold standard in such matters, at least as far as people like Bernardo's are concerned. I'd be very keen to see any different definition of white privilege which was up to date and relevant for Britain today. I can't find anything. All I've seen so far are things that are either hopelessly inaccurate, like Peggy McIntosh's, or dishonest and untruthful, like the one provided by Bernard.